So if you make lo-fi or chill type beats and are wondering how to release that first single, or maybe even making some tracks and you're just not sure if you're ready to put them out to the world, then this is the video for you. What's happening, everyone? It's your boy, yours truly, CC. I've been releasing lo-fi since 2021 and have put out over 60 tracks to date. And in that time, I've managed to gain millions of streams on digital streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music. I've also been privileged enough to work with some of the biggest labels within the genre and been lucky enough to work with some very incredibly talented artists along the way. Now, none of this would have been possible if I didn't put out that first song. And I do understand that putting out that first song as an independent artist could be one of the most difficult challenges that you can face. So in this two-part video series, I'm going to be going over what I'll be doing step by step if I was releasing my first song today. And I'm also going to be helping you figure out when you'll know that you're ready to put out that first song to the world. So let's get straight into it. Now, before we get into the details about how we're going to release that first song, we have to figure out if our music is ready to be released first. Now, there's not going to be some eureka moment that will happen where you'll just know instantly that you're ready to release that first song. It's going to have to be something that you're going to decide for yourself. However, to help you out, I'm going to be breaking down one of the first ever songs that I made and taking you through the 3 essential stages into making a track that's ready to be released. Now, the reason why I'm showing you one of my earlier tracks instead of something I've produced recently is because there are actually quite a few things I would do differently. But despite the fact that there are some things that maybe aren't perfect and I was at the beginning and still learning, it's still a song that I would consider to be ready to be put onto streaming platforms. So before I break the track down, I'll let you guys have a quick listen to it first. You've got some piano chords coming from what sounds like a detuned piano. You've got a top line melody, this time coming from a vintage piano to really give us that lo-fi effect. You've got a nice punchy kick drum, and that's really well supported by this crackly clap snare that we've got going on. And so now you have an idea of what the track sounds like. It's time that we break it down and talk about the first of those 3 stages of making a song. The first of which being composition and arrangement. So the composition and arrangement stage is where the bulk of the work is going to happen. And this is going to be the stage where you're going to really create that song structure that's going to be tweaked and finalized later on. To break it down a little bit further, the composition simply refers to the time signature, the tempo that you're going to use, the instruments that are going to be in the song, how many instruments, what instruments am I going to use, whereas the arrangement is more referring to when are we going to be introducing the different elements of the song and how is it going to be structured, how long is the song going to last for. The reason why I've squashed them together is because when you are creating a song, these 2 stages are going to be happening at the same time. You're going to be constantly removing or introducing new elements to the track. Now, compared to the last screen, you can see that there's a lot missing. And those were all the effects that were added in the later stages. But because we're just focusing on the composition and the arrangement, we're only going to be looking at what's on the screen right now. As you can see, there really aren't many elements to this track at all. In fact, there are only 8 sounds in total included in this track. And the arrangement stage is really important when it comes to creating the necessary amount of progression that's required to make a track. And as you can see on the screen, each of the elements are playing for different parts within the track. So you've got these piano chords that are more or less playing entirely throughout, whilst the drums seem to be coming in at a later stage and they disappear at some point through the track as well. Now, this is already the final product. I've already composed this track and put it in an arrangement that I'm happy with. But I just want to go through some of the individual elements so I could take you through why I made the decisions that I made. So first off, we're going to start off with these piano chords here. They're actually from the Cymatics Gems Volume 2 pack. I didn't make these chords myself. It's a sample that I've used. But let me just play you the original sound. Now, the BPM for this sample was originally 92, but I slowed it down just by a little bit to get it down to 90, simply because that was the BPM that I wanted to use. And I detuned it down by 1 semitone. So now it sounded like this. So I didn't want to hear that loop playing over and over again, and I wanted to introduce some chops to create some variation in the track. So I've just cut out this 4-bar loop here so you can hear what I mean. So I've zoomed in so that you can see, and as we get to the end of the second bars, we also approach the 4th bar here. I've just added in some extra chops to make the sound a little bit different from the original, and also I played with those throughout the song so that it didn't sound repetitive as well. After this, I grabbed a kick and snare, both from the Cymatics Ultimate Lo-Fi collection, and I just wanted to make a really simple and super upbeat pattern. And so these green notes are going to be the snare, and the grey notes that you'll see in the background are the kick. And so that pattern just sounded like this. Once again, I went simple with the hi-hats, and typically speaking, within the lo-fi genre, the drums don't need to be complicated, though they can be. There's no rules, of course, but you don't need to over-obsess about making these really complicated drum patterns. A very, very simple pattern, and I just added in this additional note here for a slight variation and change of pace within the beat. And for my bass, I actually used an 808. This is one of those things that I probably would do differently, is I wouldn't use an 808 bass on this track if I was remaking it. It actually works quite well, to be honest, but I don't think it works as well as something if I was doing it right now. But regardless, it's what we've got. It's a really simple 808 pattern, and I'll play it along with the drums so you can hear them together. So at this point, I knew I had a pretty good groove. I was quite happy with those initial piano chords, but I wanted something that was going to help the track progress, that was going to tell a little bit of a story. So what I did was I reached for the ambient space piano in Omnisphere and created this nice top melody. And so altogether, it sounds like this so far. So yeah, sounds pretty good so far, really solid bass. That top line melody just added a little bit of character to the track, and I felt that continuing to play around with these chops and the piano chords was a nice way to make for a transition going into a new phase. But still, at this point, I didn't feel that I could fill out the full length of the track. And for those of you who are wondering, typically speaking, lo-fi songs tend to last between 1 minute 30 and 3 minutes long. And so one thing that I always tend to do with my tracks is create this transition period where one of the significant elements of the track changes dramatically. And so to do this, I actually did quite a lot of things. So the first thing I did, and you'll notice, is I completely got rid of the drums. So for this section, I didn't want there to be any drums at all. I tried adding in an additional instrument to supplement the piano chords, but that didn't work out, and so I've grayed it out. And as I say, you will find that you're going to want to add and remove some elements just to try and find something perfect for yourself. This is an example of when I decided not to include something that I had added. You'll also notice that the patterns have changed number. So you've gone from pattern 1 to pattern 2. And the reason why is because it was important for me to not have the same top line melody as I was in this transition phase for the song. And as we scroll down, we'll see there are not one but 2 different sounds, again, grabbed from the Cymatics Life Pack, and they just added an additional layer and created some life for this song. So we've got some playground noise in the background, which I'll play for you here. And then you've got this vinyl crackle playing as well. And so with all those changes taken in effect, this is how the song transitioned from the previous phase to the next. So as you can see, it's nothing crazy, it's nothing amazing, but just something that can change the song and keep the listener a little bit more engaged. Now, of course, it's lo-fi music, but even when you want something in the background, you don't want it to become an annoyance, but you just want it to be quite pleasant. And you want to keep the listener somewhat engaged. And creating some progression in your tracks is a really great way to do this. And that was pretty much it. So the composition and arrangement stage is done. And once that's done, we want to move on to stage 2, and that is called the mixing stage. It's in this stage where you're going to be addressing things like really, really loud snares or claps. Maybe you want to reduce the sound of a piano because it's a bit too overbearing. Maybe you're going to need to take out some really, really high or low frequencies of some sounds. This is the stage where all that's going to take place. If you like what you've seen from this video so far, why not give it a like, and please do subscribe to the channel. It'll be really helpful to help the channel grow, and I'll be able to continue making more videos like this for you. Now let's get straight back to it. So as you can see on the screen, I've now got the mixed version of my track. A lot of automation has gone in, and I've just made some tweaks to the sounds themselves. I just want to pick out a couple of things to talk about when it came to the mixing of this track to make it sound a little bit more ready for it to be released. Generally speaking, once you're happy with the composition and arrangement, getting the right levels of volumes and just creating space in the track using panning is going to get you so far before you need to even apply any additional effects. But speaking of effects, let's just dive into a couple of these mixer channels and see what I've actually done to make the differences. So we're going to take a look at the bass, and this is the EQ curve that I used. I would never EQ my bass like this today. I've taken out all of that low frequency information that typically you'd want from an 808. It's pretty clear that I wasn't 100% sure what I was doing, but it doesn't sound terrible. It's the second song that I put out and it worked, so I just went with it. And sometimes that's what you're going to have to do, even if you find that you're doing something that's against the rules or it's not traditionally done in this way. If you think it sounds good, just go ahead. After I've set the volumes at the levels that I want them to be and done a little bit of panning, I then went on and did a little bit of processing just to craft those sounds to sound a little bit more how I wanted. And here's an example channel for you here where we've got an EQ for that piano that was playing the top melody, just added in a little bit of the mid frequencies, gave it a boost. I've added in some RC20, and here I've used the sad piano preset, and I've added in some fruity delay 3 with these settings right here. So there's not too much that's gone on, and for some of these effects you'll see that I've made them active only at certain parts of the track. So for example, this EQ here is only going to be active for these 8 bars, and afterwards it's going to be shut off again. And that's pretty much it. You know, volumes, panning, adding a little bit of processing like your EQ, your compression, maybe some saturation, and also a place to add in some automation as well, so you can really introduce and remove elements. Now, once you're happy at this stage that you've got all the automation that you want in, the effects that you have, everything's at the right levels, you're more or less at the point where you're ready for mastering. But there's just one thing you want to be aware of first. So this right here is the decibel meter. So typically when you've got that final mix, you want the track to be peaking between the -3 and the -9 before you move on to the next stage. So I'm going to play the top line melody to give you a visual representation of how this decibel meter is going to work. So as you can see, this meter was clearly reflecting what was happening with the piano. Every single time a note was struck, you'd see the meter would flash up in a light of green and show you where the sound was peaking. And obviously after the note was released, you'd see that there was still some sound around here, but it was nowhere near as loud as when the note was initially pressed, and you could see those large peaks up here. So once we've got that final mix sitting somewhere between our -3 and -9, we're now ready to move on to stage 3, which is the mastering stage. So the mastering stage is that final step of making a song, and it really just involves taking that final mix that we've got and making some small tweaks to improve the overall sound quality, to make that track sound loud, clear and consistent across different devices like speakers, headphones or car stereos. Now, unless you've got some experience when it comes to mixing and mastering, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to understand how to effectively master a track the first time round. Well, that doesn't mean that you can't learn, and you absolutely should learn, but it's unlikely you'll be able to understand what you're doing early on. But that shouldn't stop you from releasing that first song. as there are plenty of ways that you can get your song mastered without necessarily having to do the work yourself. With the rapid rise that we've seen in AI technology, it's no surprise that it's going to be quite essential to helping us getting that first good master. There are now free platforms like Lander or BandLab that can provide you with AI generated mastered tracks. Personally, back in the day, I wasn't aware of these tools, and I relied quite heavily on Ozone to just do a bit of the work for me. So for this particular track, I just used the light cleanup preset, made any minor changes that I felt were necessary, and that was pretty much. Now you'll also notice a couple other things that didn't make it onto the master that I've turned off here, like the fruity limiter, these two loud max limiters, and also the halftime that I was going to put in. You'll also notice Glitch 2 plugin, which is currently turned all the way down in the mix, but it does appear, and it was simply used for the intro where I applied the tape stop effects. That was all. So the only other thing that I haven't spoken about is this plugin here called the U-Lean loudness meter. Now this is a really great plugin to tell you how loud your song is actually going to sound. And whilst this decibel meter is important, it doesn't necessarily reflect what we're actually hearing, but rather the level of the sound that's being generated. So this is what the plugin looks like, and there's only two areas that we're going to want to be focusing on. So that is here what we call our integrated LUFS, and down here what we call our true peak. So once again, that true peak is referring to what is the loudest point of the track that we're seeing. Typically speaking, you do not want this to surpass 0 decibels, and when it comes to the recommended amount of LUFS that you want for Spotify records, -14 is what they say, but you often find that some songs are pushed a lot higher than this. Now for lo-fi, I wouldn't say it's necessary to go much higher than -14. I actually ended up having -8 on this track. Again, that's something that I probably would do a little bit differently if I was releasing it today. But I digress. So what I'm going to do is play some of the song, and you'll see how the plugin interacts with the music. So as you can see, it's kind of giving you this live updated level of the LUFS, and you can see that we're sitting at about -8.5, probably higher than I would go today. Meanwhile, the true peak is not necessarily changing live, but simply reflects the highest level that was reached whilst you were playing the song and the plugin was active. And honestly, that's all it takes. You get your composition and arrangement that you're happy with, you mix it to get the song sounding exactly how you want it to, and then you master it to prepare it to be listened to on different devices and be ready to be received by streaming services. And once we've made any tweaks we felt were required and given it that final listen through and are happy, we've now finished the mastering stage and we have a finished song. Now, if you're new to production, you may find that even if you've completed going through all 3 stages, you might struggle to make music that's going to sound like your favorite lo-fi artist. In fact, you're probably going to struggle to make something that you're truly happy with at the beginning. And that's simply because getting the hang of composing and arranging, mixing a song and then mastering it is very, very difficult and can take years of experience before you get quite competent at doing this. Mixing and mastering can take years of hard work, and I'm still learning new concepts myself every day. But even as I continue to learn, it hasn't stopped me from using the knowledge and creativity that I do have to make good music that people want to listen to. So taking all that into account, I'd really encourage you not to try and make that perfect single when you're first starting out. And the reason why I say this, especially if you're at that beginner stage, is because it's so easy to find something wrong with a song, something that you feel could have been improved or may sound better, or just something that's not quite how you want it to be. And before you know it, you'll be procrastinating and having a pile of unfinished songs that you're not happy with in search for that perfect first song that quite simply isn't going to exist when you're at the very beginning. And as I said earlier, these skills can take years to master, so there's no reason why you can't be releasing music whilst improving on your skills at the same time. And one really good way to notice that you're overthinking the process a bit too much is when you start to notice yourself going back and forth with a particular element of the mix. For example, if you find that you've turned the snare down by 1 decibel and then you found it's too quiet then and you've turned it up again by 1 decibel, at that point you're probably just overthinking. The listener is not going to be paying attention to how loud or quiet that snare is. So that's it. You've made a composition that you're happy with and you've mixed and mastered the song so it's ready to be released. And that brings us on to part 2 of this video series. And in this second video, I want to show you how to release that first single and take you through a step-by-step beginner's guide on how you're going to get that song from your laptop or computer straight onto digital streaming platforms so that anyone can listen to it. And if you're not already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so that you'll be notified as soon as that video is available. And if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.